Welcome to dridhOn channel. Here we are discussing about Adobe Experience Manager Introduction with industry experts.
Hey Rajesh, hello. Hello Rajesh. Hey Rajesh, am I audible? Hello?
Hi. Hi, ma'am.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, it's audible.
Yeah, Rajesh. So before we get started, you want to quickly talk about yourself? I mean, I have not spoken to you before, I guess, right? Have you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, for what? Sorry, I didn't get that.
I don't spoke with you last time.
Okay. So yeah, do you want to talk about yourself and give me a brief overview of your technical background?
Yeah, I'm Rajesh. I'm completed BCA in 2019. Right now, I'm completed Java and I'm doing JS and CSS and HTML course.
Okay. So you are, are you comfortable with Java and Eclipse?
Yeah, I'm completed core Java only.
Okay.
I'm not completed advanced like servlets. Not completed that. I'm okay with core Java.
Core Java, that should do. So you're comfortable with this one also, right? As in uh, uh, the ID, Eclipse is an ID and all that, right?
Yeah. Eclipse,
Okay.
I'm aware of that. Eclipse and ID. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Here we use for JS, HTML and CSS, we use VS Code or Eclipse, man.
So actually, I don't use JS. I will not. JS part is not part of my agenda. So
Okay.
you can use Eclipse as an this one.
Okay. And like the CSS and HTML.
Yes, CSS and HTML also will not be part of my agenda. My agenda is going to be. Let me quickly brief you over what my agenda is going to be, and then maybe you will be aware of it. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
So if you can see my screen, so basically, before we get started, let me talk about myself. So I've been working in IT industry for last 10 plus years, and on AEM I've been working from last 9 plus years. So from the beginning, I've been on AEM projects. So I do not have hands on anything other than AEM. Actually, as an AEM and Adobe Suites is my expertise. And coming to trainings, I've been training people from last 3 to 4 years, wherein I've been working as a freelance trainer for multiple training institutes. So yeah, so that's about myself. So as part of AM training, I'll be taking around 25 hours of training maximum. So it will come from somewhere between 23 to 25 hours of training is where we'll be going over, in which initial 7 to 8 hours is going to be totally theoretical, wherein I'll explain about overview of different concepts of AM. Post that, we'll get started off with the hands-on plus overview, wherein like how to build a component, editable templates, and all of that. So let me brief you. So initial 7 hours, I'm going to cover about this AEM architecture. So post architecture, we will go over the development approach. Usually, I think you are a fresher, right? So when you get
Yeah, I'm a
onto a
fresher.
project on any companies, right, how the development approach is going to be. That is what I'm going to brief you about. Then you have a detail. Then I'll cover details on URL decomposition, which is nothing but Sling resolution in terms of AEM. So how exactly when you make a request from your browser, so basically, if you know, AEM is used to build content managed sites, right? Where you have a lot of content which you will keep changing multiple times. So for such scenarios, you will use AEM. So you can change the content flexibly, and it is going to be easy for maintaining digital assets and all of those. So that's why people would choose AEM to build their websites. So when
Okay.
you have your site up and running, how the site is going to be, how the content is going to be driven for your site. It's mostly going to be from the URLs, right? So you make a
Yeah.
request, and that URL will kind of resolve itself and render the content to end users. So how that happens on a theoretical side, I'm going to explain that via this topic, that is URL decomposition. First, and I'll show you how to do AEM setup. So AEM setup, AEM installations, basically if you have JDK 1.8
Yeah, I have
uh,
1.8 and
uh, and Maven, if you have Maven installed, latest versions of Maven, then we should be good to get started. This is just a
okay.
jar file I'll be sharing with you, so you can just have that setup done. So we'll see how to
Okay.
set up author publishers. Dispatcher is something which I will not be going over because that is a different level of expertise. Okay.
Okay. And you
So,
cover replication agents like
yes, replication agent.
yeah.
Yeah, basically the setup of replication agents will be done by your
Okay.
admin team. So I'll show you where exactly that will be done, but it won't be
Okay.
helpful
And
for any.
event handlers, event listeners.
No, event handlers, event listeners would all come in your advanced training course. So this is just gonna be on your basic course.
Okay.
So you we can see that. So if you see AEM project wise, how to build a project, as in how to create a new AEM project, and how to add
Yep.
content to it, and different project structures, right? We'll be going over that. Post that,
Okay.
we'll see various consoles of what your Adobe Experience Manager developer will need. So there are a lot of other consoles which will be utilized by your content authors, your AEM admin team, and others. So you will be as a backend developer. These are the various consoles which will be required for any EM developer to
Okay.
know. So that is one thing. And then post that we'll see how on the authoring side, how to manage content and how to author pages, how to, add assets, how to package things and all that. We'll be going over that because that's one key aspect for any developer to know. After we are done with this, then we'll get started off with your component side, wherein we'll first see documentation on Cytely. So say how to write details and how to write your scripts in Cytely language. It's not a language actually, it's basically data attributes that you'll be adding to your HTML elements itself. So we'll go over those syntaxes, as well as then we'll get started off with creating editable templates. So once we create editable templates, then we'll see how to create a custom component and how internationalization is met, and how to build your new components. After that, we'll see how to build a dialog and client libraries. So client libraries is where you'll be pushing all your front end code, right? JavaScript and CSS. So we'll show you how that goes and how that sits. So dialog is mostly to make things dynamic, as in the same component will be used on multiple side pages, right? Like a hero component. So it can be used on both homepage as well as on any other landing pages, right? So based on the dialogue, it could render the content accordingly. So that's why your dialogues will be required. So
Okay.
dialogue is where we'll be going over. Post that, we'll see on the backend side where we'll go over how to log things. Once we are good with logging, as in how to monitor logs, how to add a new log file, and how to debug things and all that, we'll see that once
Here
we
we use only 6.3. We are not using 6.4 and 6.5.
6.3 is it? I have 6.2. I don't know if Kiran has 6.3. I'll check with Kiran if he's got 6.3.
Yeah, I'm using right now. I'm using 6.5. I'm
Okay.
downloaded 6.5.
If you have 6.5, I mean, you're able to, is that server up and running?
Sorry?
Is that the jar file up and running?
Yeah, it's running. Jar file is
Then
running.
you can use the same thing. You don't have to use the one which I shared.
Okay.
So you can use whatever you have. Everything would be so from 6.2 onwards, whatever came in, right? From the development point of view, everything is the same. Things haven't changed from the development standpoint. Things have changed from the architectural side, which is mostly for managing your assets and so many other things related to your front end side or the authoring side of it. Nothing much on the development side. Code hasn't changed, as in the coding language stuff, styles or things that hasn't changed. So
Okay.
should be okay.
Okay.
Post we're done with logging, we'll then go over how to create Sling models, integrate OSGI services and OSGI components, how to build Sling servlets, and how to use inheritance hierarchy and all of that. So once we're done with this, we'll also go over search concepts, wherein how to use query builder in your application as in your code. So once we are good there, then comes my final topic where workflows. We'll be going over how to create a new workflow. This will just be a 1 hour course, wherein 1 hour session for workflows, where I'll just show a brief overview of how to create a new model, how to create new launchers and stuff associated to workflows.
Okay.
This won't be in depth. The reason because there's nothing, not many projects use custom workflows, and out of the box workflows, authors will be pretty much okay to use those. We don't have to worry on that side. That's it. So that's about my training course, which will be concluding by in like around 20 hours, 23 to 25 hours of training.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes. So any questions so far?
Okay. And you cover Sling models and Sling schedulers also.
Sling models, yes. Sling schedulers, no. Because basically, schedulers,
Schedulers is
event handlers,
that's an advanced topic.
yes. Schedulers, event listeners, event handlers, those are all advanced topics. I'll also show you when you build or create or when you create a new project, right? Automatically, you will get a sample code for it. So in that sample code, I can quickly show that to you. You won't be doing hands-on if you want. We can just see how it is created and stuff. So schedulers,
Okay.
you can we can see that. But basically, you will not be on a real-time projects, right? Very rarely you'll be using these schedulers, event handlers, and event listeners because basically all you need is when you build a site, you will need more of component side and not on the scheduler side where you won't be scheduling any job as such and stuff. So those are very minor ones. I won't say it is not at all there. It would be there, but majority 80 to 90% it would be on the topics what I'm covering as part of this course.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And what topics I need to prepare in Java now? I need to
Java, you should know core Java collections and stuff.
Okay. Okay. Collections. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
collections, core Java, OOPS concepts and all, right? That how to code and stuff and writing syntaxes in Java language, as in
Okay.
writing logic in Java language in the right using the right syntax. That's all you have to know.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So that's about it. All right. Let's get started off with AEM architecture.
Okay.
So initially, if you know, like Adobe Experience Manager was called as CQ, which is nothing but day communique, and yes, it was it was a product which was built from a very long time back, and it was in the version numbers where it was around 5.6, 5.4, and all of those versions. So from there, CQ started and Adobe acquired this or Adobe bought this particular product and they rebranded it to call it as Adobe Experience Manager, and then they started with a new version number that is 6.0. So from 6.0 onwards, it was Adobe's acquisition on the tool, and that's when they introduced a lot of new stuffs into the product. So I won't say the core part of it didn't change. The core part of it was pretty much the same, except for slightly modifications of the architecture here and there. But rest all the architecture or whatever stuff was used is all the same. Only thing that they introduced was this granite layer where the touch UI side of components was introduced. The touch UI components is mostly for authoring this component stuff. It's nothing much on the product's functionality for an end user level. Okay, So that is what Adobe did. So from 6.2 onwards, they also introduced your Sightly language, which was kind of, cross-site safe. When I say cross-site safe, you don't have to explicitly add. So earlier we used to write your HTMLs and stuff as far as JSPs. Okay, so in your JSP, you would write all your code for rendering the content into the front end. So your JSP code, right? Especially if you're calling your backend code or something, those could be anybody could inject anything into those, right? If you are not handling the XSS thing. So those were security threats were there. If you're until unless you were explicitly handling those. So with Sightly coming in, everything on the we start writing things in the HTML and using Sightly tags. So all of these automatically handle your cross-site errors or security threats, and they kind of handle things pretty much even without you explicitly calling your XSS APIs. So that is something which they introduced. So with that new change, this is how the architecture looks like. Your base, whatever comes or whatever drives your application is your Java runtime environment. So with your JRE itself, JRE is the base for your application. JRE is required because it has to be compatible for your server to be up and running, and some OS should be supporting that particular product, right? So, or that software, right? So that's why it is kind of compatible with your JRE, where you have your OS which drives that particular AEM application.
Okay.
So over GRE, you have so many other levels. So the levels in blue color, right? Light blue is all part of Granite platform. So Granite platform is nothing but your OSGI is similar to your GRE. Your OSGI framework also behaves as a base for your entire product code or your server to be up and running. So your server basically is reliant on OSGI framework and your JRE. So your JRE for making it compatible with that OS, and OSGI framework is to execute your features, execute your code, right? Is all, or your Java code is all the standing version of or the standing support for your product. Okay. So a Granite platform includes this OSGI framework, servlet engine, CRX content repository, and Sling content delivery.
Content delivery.
So your base of the base of your product is JRE. So over JRE, what is standing? So when a request comes to your application, right? Your app server should always be there, right? Any Java, if you would have already gone ahead with a Java course, you would know about these terminologies, servlet engine, app servers and stuff, right? To run your Java application, correct? So your app server is nothing but your load balancers or your dispatchers, where you would actually be hosting that particular application, as in for an end user. Okay. So when a request comes to your particular server, it's the app server which receives that particular request, and then it sends to different areas or different levels of your product to process that request, and it in the end your app server renders the response to your end user. Okay. So app server is the base. Parallel to app server, you have your servlet engine. So your servlet engine is again required. So from the app server, it hits the servlet engine. So post it hits the servlet engine, that is when it will see if it is present in the cache. It will render the response back to app server from the cache, and it will render the content. But if it is not there in the cache, it will then process it with the help of OSGI framework and the other levels to process that particular request, and then it will frame that response and send it back to your app server. Okay, so your servlet engine is a dispatcher side, and this is going to be your load balancer. So yes, above. So if your servlet engine is not going to have that particular cache or content, right? All it does is it sends the request to your AEM CRX side, where the content is saved in terms of nodes and properties. Okay. So that request will be broken into different areas, and those areas will be after it's broken, the URL decomposition or Sling resolution happens, which will look for that respective particular content mapped to a particular script, and with the help of Sling content delivery, it will and your OSGI framework, all it will do is it will make the or it will build that response and it will send it to your app server. Okay.
Okay.
So above, so for your Sling content delivery and CRX content repository, right? So CRX content repository is doing nothing. It's all saving the content in terms of nodes and properties. But for the request to be broken into different areas and fetching that particular request and calling that respective script which is relevant to that request, right? Those script resolutions, all of that will be dependent on URL decomposition as well as this AEM modules. So AEM modules is nothing but your out of the box, you would have had certain features which your Adobe has built for your product to function properly. So this could be your out of box objects like page object or your node object, your resource resolver. All of these objects code are all initialized and built as part of this AEM modules. Along with your AEM modules, you'll also have so many other ready to use components. So those are all out of the box ones. So these AEM modules is a key thing for your product to function properly. So if anything gets corrupted or anything gets overridden by you on your AEM modules, right, your product or your server will stop functioning properly. So in case you would want to override some function, you will have to write your custom code by overriding it in a custom application module level. So you build a project, you write all the customization and then deploy that on top of your OEM modules. That's when you can customize things. So your Sling delivery, it will look for, it will resolve the scripts and it will build the, as in from the backend side, it will kind of look at the out of the box ones. And over that, it will give the first priority to your custom application code, whatever you would have written. Clear? So that's how it features. So coming to Granite platform, these blue ones are all your Granite platforms, right? Clear with this?
Yeah, okay. I'm clear.
Okay. So your AEM modules, what are the stuff which are available there? So if you see, you have your out-of-box geometrics, V-retails, geometric site, your V-retail site, your weekend site now. So all of these websites are available, sample websites. So people could see the sample content and they could also use the same thing in their application or they could build on top of it. So those things could be done. You also have certain mobile applications, sample projects also running, or even your SPAs, whatever you would want to build, right? The core part for it. All of that is all called or scripts are written in your AEM modules for your digital assets, for your data to be saved, right? Data as in your content assets, which is nothing but your PDFs, documents, or anything else which you're using on your website. All of that should be saved, right? So all of that, and even your Adobe communities and Magento e-commerce, for all of that, code is written inside your AEM modules where you can customize it based on your requirement and you could build it. Okay.
Okay.
So your AEM modules, so in case you would want to override something, never override in the same place where AEM modules are present. You will have to overlay it or override it. Overlays in, we'll see that concept when we see the application of the building. So, or at that time. So, yeah, so you should not be building it anywhere here. You should be building on top of it. So over here, if you see, when we come back to this particular Granite area, right? So now I'll move on towards my CQ servlet engine side. So CQ servlet engine is nothing but your dispatcher level side. So basically your servlet engine for your AEM comes out of the box as part of your jar file itself. Okay, so Jetty is the servlet engine which comes in by default when you have or when you have started your instance or your server in terms of jar. So if you have not started it as a jar file, and if you want to override this particular servlet engine to be something else like Tomcat or WebSphere or JBoss or something else, that's when you'll take the war side of that particular product and then you will have to install that particular servlet engine accordingly, configure it, and then you can kind of start using that application properly. So this side of setup will be done by your admin team, that is your Adobe's your project's admin team, whoever is maintaining your server. Okay.
Okay.
So that's on that side. So by default, so far I have never seen any projects explicitly changing this application to be running on a WAR file to you change this particular application service, because everybody is pretty much happy with Jetty itself. So in case you would need, then they still have an option of changing that.
Okay.
So this is on the servlet engine side. So with this, since they are already Jetty is your built-in servlet engine, you don't have any installation process to be required. So all you have to do is you will just have to double click and start your Java jar file as an Adobe Experience Manager jar file, because you would have already installed your JDK in your machines. Okay.
Okay.
So that's on the servlet engine side. On the Sling content delivery side, okay, 1 second, I'll just be back in a minute. Yeah, on the Sling content delivery side, hey, you there, right?
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Rajesh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the Sling content delivery side, if you see, you have your Sling OSGI services, OSGI consoles, which is going to redirect the request, and it's going to map that particular request URL to your content. So basically that works in terms of your REST principles. So like if you see anything which comes, either it should be SOAP or your REST API calls, or your REST calls or your SOAP calls, right? Your request is usually in any of these two areas. So for AEM, your request is mostly coming in as an input for your server, and Adobe Experience Manager takes it as in terms of your REST principles. So the URL path is the one which drives the content which gets rendered on the front end. Okay. So it's mostly
Okay.
your OSGI dependent on your REST principles, which is doing this. So how it actually works is mostly dependent on this concept, that is your Sling resource resolution or the URL decomposition, which is going to be done. So URL decomposition is nothing but your path, your request path will be mapped to some particular node and the respective properties which are associated to that particular node. We'll see that when we do that Sling resolution. So above your Sling content delivery, you have this content repository, which is nothing but CRX D, wherein you have your content saved in terms of nodes and properties. So when you extract that, it will come in and appear as a file system, wherein the nodes will appear as a folder and properties will appear as an XML file. But in the front end, as in from the UI perspective or from the GUI perspective, when you see it is all saved as part of nodes and properties. So your CRX basically this is mostly your certification question. Your CRX was so Adobe is using your JCR type of content repository, which it is using this CRX is the implementation for the JCR one. So the version number which it is using is your JSR 283, and basically JCR is nothing but it is one repository, and CRX is one implementation of that particular repository. So if you understand Java, your interface kind of thing, right? that is something your implementation classes. So your interface is your JCR, and the implementation class for that one would be your CRX, something like that. So JCR is a type of repository and CRX is the implementation of JCR, and Adobe is using this particular CRX implementation on their application, which is nothing but it is using this GSR 283 version of this particular JCR one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's on the content repository side. Then moving forward, we'll see on the OSGI framework.
The framework.
OSGI framework is basically this again, the another core base for your project for it to be up and running, right? So how it would work. So OSGI is nothing but your open service gateway initiative, which is nothing but mostly driving things in terms of REST principles. Okay, so your OSGI is one of the Java framework, and it will all so your Java framework on the backend portion, and on the basic core would be on the bundles. It would be similar to your bundles. So if you see when you write your Java code, right, when you build it using any Maven plugin or your Ant scripts or something, right? Whenever you build it, it will be compiled and it will be converted into a compiled piece of code, which will be minified kind, and it will be kind of pushed into your application server, correct? So when you build and deploy it there, either that could be compiled as a jar file or something else for whatever that application supports. So AEM also is mostly using Java framework, and when it builds a jar file, but that jar file will be converted to a bundle, OSGI bundle, which is nothing but how different is your bundle and a jar file. So a bundle is nothing but it is just the jar file itself, except for it will have one additional class, additional file, which is nothing but this manifest.mf file associated to that particular jar file. Okay, so this manifest.mf file will have all the details of what needs to be what will be present as part of that particular jar file. So that jar file will be importing certain things from your Maven repository, and it would have written certain functionalities which you would want to expose it for somebody else to consume, right? Some third party service to use. So those things, so all those details, so import packages, export packages, all of these details will be present inside this manifest file, and it will also have additional details like your bundle name, bundle ID, and bundle version number, all of these details. So all this will be present inside this manifest file, which will be associated to that particular jar file once you build it. So that presence of this manifest file in this meta INF folder, which is associated to that jar, makes it makes a simple jar file as a OSGI bundle. Okay.
Okay.
So that's on the OSGI framework side. So bundles, basically why they went ahead with it, reason because so you will have multiple bundles, right? Like on a server, on a single server, you can host multiple sites, correct? So I can have a single site or a micro site running up and running, like I have this Deloitte.com, www.deloitte.com. Let me share my whole screen. Very good. So if you see on Deloitte.com, right, there are so many other microsites running. So this is my site, and on this site, I have so many other sub-sites running, which is nothing but this is on an English site. This is on Albania and Kosovo English site. And I have so many other country sites which are all running. And these are all running on the same server, right? It doesn't have to be running on different servers. So this is one use case. And you would also have certain other use cases like your careers itself, right? Like if you just look at your careers page or something, for this, it can be a site within your AEM, or it could be a site within outside this particular domain name. So multiple sites can be hosted on the same server, correct? Because depending on the server size, whatever you have. So once you have you might have microsites or so many other sites running on the same server. And when you are kind of building and deploying for one server, like for example, this is my main site, and assume like Carriers is having a different site. Or for example, like in this way we saw English is one side, and you have so many other language sites present, right? English, French, and all are two different sites. So for English, I have built some component which is not used on France site. So all I do is I just build and deploy changes for this particular site. So when I want that, so for example, this particular feature, right, this hero component, this can be used only on my English site and not.
Hello. Hello.
French, you can build one backend code, and for English, you will build one more backend code, and these backend code.
Hello.
Sorry, I got dropped off in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have two sites, French and English, and I build two different projects for driving the features or functionality associated to each site.
Please share me your screen. Hello.
Hey, Rajesh, sorry, something is off with my network. Right, yeah. So, yeah. So with so you have different sites.
Okay. Screen share. Okay.
Yeah. So you have different sites running, and one functional, and based on functionalities, you have built in different bundles for it. So what happens tomorrow, for some reason you would want to bring down one particular functionality. So at that time, without stopping that particular server and without stopping the other bundles which are up and running, right? Like your English site will still be running and you would just want to bring only one particular feature down. And if you've segregated that as a different bundle, you can automatically stop that bundle even without restarting your application. Okay, so all you have to do is you have to just go to that OSA console, stop that bundle. So that's when that particular bundle will stop running. So when obviously any page that is using that particular code which is written in that particular bundle, that will stop working. But other pages which is not dependent on that bundle will still be up and running. So this additional feature which wherein you can stop your bundle and you can also deploy a particular bundle. So even a hotfix if you would want to push something, right, without impacting the other application, without impacting the other sites or any other applications or other bundles, you can just deploy one single bundle. So that's an added advantage for your bundles. So that is where you would kind of go ahead and deploy the bundles. So here the bundles can be independently started, stopped, and you can also uninstall and install those bundles based on the way you would want your feature code to be deployed on your environment. Okay, so that's on the bundle side. So when you say the content within the bundle, as in the code which you have written for one inside one particular bundle, will be tightly coupled. Obviously, it's all in the single bundle or single jar file, right? So those are all featuring or functioning together hand in hand. Those are tightly coupled. But between bundles, it is loosely coupled. So anytime you would want to segregate and keep things separate, in that case you would go ahead and build a separate bundle. So usually on a site level you would not have such major differences. Mostly everything would be in one single bundle. Only thing is, like when you have multiple sites running, you could have some common feature between these bundles, right? So those common features you put it in a different common module and build that as a bundle and deploy. EN specific code or your FR specific code, you'll build its own respective bundles altogether there. Okay.
Okay.
So that's when you will start using the bundle level. So you'll get to know this when we do this project structure pretty well, right? That time you'll get to understand this.
Okay.
So any questions on any of these layers of EM architecture?
No questions.
Okay. So this is on the AIM architecture side. So when you get started off with any project, right, how the development approach would be. So basically, you will first have your GitHub or any code versioning tool, which will be present. So it could be
Okay.
GitHub or Bitbucket or Purpose or a Visual Studio or whatever it is. Whichever
Okay.
your client is supporting or your project is supporting, you would have the code versioning tool available. So once
Okay.
you join, you will have that particular access to that repository. So once you get access to that repository, there will also be a Jenkins setup which will be set up to deploy the code automatically to any server. So you will have multiple servers. Like for example, since you are on a project Deloitte, example Deloitte project, right? So
Yeah.
on Deloitte project, what you would do? So what they do is they'll set up a dev instance. Local, obviously, you'll have it. You'll have one dev instance. You will have a QA instance for QAs, dev for devs, wherein they'll do the unit testing on your environment, and then QA instance. Post QA is all good. Then they'll deploy it on UAT instance, where UAT is mostly used for your business users, right? You won't have any junk content in it. It would mimic exactly your production service. So UAT and post UAT is all good. That's when you have your production service. So production service which will be live for your end users. So you will have multiple instances which will be set up, and obviously if you want to deploy the code from one instance to another instance, right? You will obviously commit the code into your code versioning tool, whichever they are using. And via Jenkins, they will build and deploy that to respective instance as and when you are required. It's required. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So basically, what you do is from the code versioning tool, all you'll do is you will have to create a feature branch there, and then you will check out the feature branch, and then you will start pushing the code into that feature branch. So once you
Okay.
push the code to the feature branch, you will build it and deploy it, and you kind of test it on your local instance. On your local author, if everything goes well, that's when you push the code and raise the pull request from your feature to your remote branch, whichever it is. It could be your develop branches. So once you deploy, once your PR is kind of, or your pull request is kind of raised between your feature to develop, that's when the review of it happens, and your after peer reviews or for multiple levels of code reviews, the feature branch will be deployed onto your application. As in, it will be merged to your develop branch. Post merging the pull request, the develop branch will be deployed into your dev servers or your QA servers respectively. Okay. So that's how it is usually done. So I've just put together a few lines of code, like usually how this works. So this structure would change from project to project depending on whoever is leading that project. So each one will have their own, way of handling this part. So I, as a developer, I have been following this particular approach. Majority of us would follow the same thing, but there could be certain deviations as well with this. So if you just see this, go through this when I share the PPT. So this is on the UI side how it would look. So your Git repository is where all your code will be present, and your Jenkins will would deploy the code whenever something is committed to your Git repository onto that specific branch which your Jenkins is continuously listening to. Like for example, your develop branch. Once something is pushed into your develop branch, it will build it and deploy it into your respective environments. So developer will test the code in his local machine. Post testing in his local machine, he'll raise the pull request. Post the pull request is merged, your Jenkins will deploy to your dev environment. Once the dev environment build is done, you will validate that on the dispatcher end, because here you don't have the dispatcher up and running, right? So that's why you validate it on dispatcher end on the dev servers, which your admin team will obviously set it up for. So they'll set up both author, publisher, and your dispatcher. On your local, it's usually only author instance which you'll be testing, and to test in published mode, you just check in view as published mode only, and nothing other than that. So in the dev environment, you do actual unit testing. Post doing the unit testing, you are good to go to release it to QA. So once you give the sign off, the QA can get the Jenkins will deploy to QA environment, and then the process continues. Okay. So this is on the development approach side. Any questions on this?
No questions.
Okay. So in terms when I say AEM, right? So there are 3 levels of your server interactions, okay? Of your request interactions, I would say, not your servers. So you first have your author instance, and then you have your publish instance, then you have your dispatchers, and parallel to your dispatcher is your load balancers. Okay. So let me just. So how your request comes? So here, this is my request when I hit the browser, right? Like for example, you saw I made a call to this particular www.deloitte.com and to some particular page path, right? We'll see how that breaks in the next one. But this is your request which comes in from your browser to your particular, when it hits that URL. So what happens? So first it will have this particular load balance. So I'll just go from here.
Author.
Publish.
Okay. One.
And then you will have only one load balancer. So your request from the browser would hit this particular load balancer. Okay. So once it hits the load balancer, your load balancer's job is just nothing. It's just routing to the relevant dispatcher based on the number of requests which your each dispatcher is handling. So Hey, sorry, Rajesh.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. So, let me screen again. Yeah. So here, when your request comes from your browser, it would hit your load balancer. So your load balancer, what it does is, it will actually check which particular dispatcher is serving the requests. So your load
Okay.
balancer job is nothing but it will see the number of requests each dispatcher is serving. So if
Okay.
around 10 people are hitting and your first dispatcher is rendering around like probably one probably around three requests and your dispatcher 2 is hitting your around 5 requests. Okay, so when this is happening, your load balancer, all it does is at that minute when it is actually routing that request, it will see which is rendering less number of requests and it will route the request to that particular dispatcher. So now
Okay.
when I hit this request, since it is hitting only 3, it will route my request to this dispatcher 1. So once it does the rendering, once it does the rendering to dispatcher, in dispatcher is where you will be caching the content. Okay. So your cached content will be present inside your dispatcher, wherein the static elements, right, like your header, footer, and all the other links which are present on your site, right, most of them will be static content, unless it is something your dynamic content like comments, right? Comments would I keep adding comments and you also come back and reply to that comment, all of that, right? So such things would be dynamic. Apart from that, the respective content which would be static, which they author and publish, right? Those things would be static, and those will be cached in your dispatcher. So if all it does is once the request reaches this particular dispatcher, it will just look for that particular request within that same cached path inside the dispatcher. It will be cached in the same structure as whatever is going to be requested for as per the URL itself. So if that is not there in the cache, then the dispatcher one will be mapped to each publisher. So each dispatcher will have its own publishers. You will not have the same dispatcher map to say different publishers. Okay, it is a one-on-one relationship between publisher and dispatcher. So your dispatcher, if it doesn't find any content in the cache, it will route the request to the publisher and request for that particular request, whatever is being sent. So once the request is processed and the response is framed by your AEM modules and other levels of AEM, right? So once that is done, all it does is it will send the response from publisher to dispatcher again, and in dispatcher it will cache that content and then it will render the response to that particular browser. Okay, so these are the three levels, that is publisher, dispatcher, and your load balancer. These are the three levels of your request processing which would happen, and or the request would hit in these three levels. So this is how the content would render. So whenever you would want to build a page or build change the content and all, it will be present on your author. You will have only one author instance, which will be available only for your content authors to be added. It will not be available for end users to access this particular author instance. Okay. So people who have credentials to log into your AEM application, only those guys will have access to authors, wherein they'll go into author, they will create that page using AEM templates and they'll create a page. They'll use the drag and drop the components on the page and then they'll author the content in the AEM dialogues, the component dialogues. So once that is authored, then they will publish it. So once they publish it, all the changes will be pushed from your author to both publishers. So your application agents will be configured in such a way that the same content will be pushed to both publishers at a time. Okay. So if I do one change on one page, if I have two publishers or if I have three publishers, your application agents will be set up in such a way that all three publishers will be in sync with the same content, whatever is being replicated. Okay. So once I author, I publish the content. So that means that content will be present on your publishers. So when I publish that content, what it does is it will also invalidate that cache which is present in your dispatcher one. So that configurations is all set up by your AEM admin team. Whenever they set up this dispatcher, they set up the cache path for it, and they also set up the replication agents and the dispatcher flush agents to also clear the cache. So like home page, I've made some change. After I publish it, it will be pushed to your pub 1 and pub 2 or pub 3, whatever, how many publishers you have. Once you have that deployed, you should also clear that cache, right? Because otherwise, how will dispatcher know that this is a cached one or not? So once it is done, once the change is pushed to publisher 1, your publisher automatically your author triggers your dispatcher flush agents to clear the cache on the dispatcher 1. So that's when the new request comes in, it will just see this, since it has cleared the dispatcher cache, the request will again come back to publisher 1. It will render, process that request, return back to the dispatcher, wherein it will cache it and then send the response to their end users. Okay.
Okay.
This is how your request flow is on AEM. Any questions on this one?
No questions.
Okay. So by default, you will, I mean, most of the applications would have at least 2 publisher instances, depending on the client. So in case they don't have 2 publishers, and if 1 publisher is only there, it's a major risk, because if something happens and the load increases on publisher, when pub 1 goes down or pub 1 goes down, then if you don't have any other alternative publishers, then you will not have, your site will go down, right? So in order to stop such things from happening, all they do is they have multiple pub servers. That way, even if one server goes down for issues, the other one will be rendering. So your site would not go down much. So monitoring team will keep monitoring your publishers, and when something goes down, they'll immediately notify the respective team, and they work on fixing the issue, and they'll bring the server up. So this is how the process works on the real-time projects. Any questions so far?
No questions. This is new tool now.
Yeah. So this is on it. So we'll get started off in the next class. We'll see how URL decomposition happens. So I'm not sure of your timings.
Any timings will be okay for me.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, I'll talk to Kiran and see when we can connect tomorrow. I'll just notify. It's mostly going to be in the mornings. That should be okay, right? So you're free this week, will be right? Okay for me. Are you free this whole week?
Yeah, I'm free with this whole week.
Okay, yeah. So this week and next week I'm off. So let's try to cover most of the topics by then. So tomorrow we can sync up again. I'll ping the timings to Kiran, and then he can convey that to you.
Okay. And share with the video this video.
Sure. The recordings, I think Kiran will share that with you. I will not have access to it. Okay.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
I'll speak with Kiran.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rajesh. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Introduction class. If you want to register, please visit dridhOn.com, or you want to discuss more or check for the trial classes, please call 9066508122 or visit dridhOn.com. Thank you.